Hi, everyone. So thank you for joining us here this evening. My name is Lynn Murray, and I'm with Fridays for Future West Kootenai. I also co-host and produce the Ecocentric Environment News Radio Hour on Kootenai Co-op Radio. And my pronouns are he, him, and I'm really honored to be here co-hosting this event with Taya DePaoli from Kimberley, and Jamie Hunter will be our timekeeper. And I'll turn it over to Taya.
Hi, I'm Taya from Kimberley. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm honored to share the role of moderator this evening. Before we start, we want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional and unceded lands of the Sinixt, Ktunaxa, Secwepemc, and Silts people. We also recognize that just giving a land acknowledgement is not enough. We need to talk about how brutal and systemic practices have and continue to harm their cultures. Incredulously, Indigenous people were not allowed to vote in BC until 1949, and federally until 1960. We are at a critical time where our dominant colonial-rooted culture is beginning to understand the deep ways that Indigenous people care for the land and each other. And humbly, we strive to learn from them as we need this wisdom at our late hour.
Thanks, Taya. We will be recording this evening tonight. The recording will be made available tomorrow in the morning for anyone to view. We are also live streaming this on Facebook.
This event is hosted by the Fridays for Future West Kootenai team, an environmental youth group inspired by Greta Thunberg, and Nelson West Kootenai chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL, whose goal is to build political will for a livable world and to help people claim their personal and political power. We decided to host this forum because we understand that solving the climate crisis is the challenge of our times. It is tied to all aspects of our society and the natural world we depend on. We need all levels of government, organizations, businesses, and citizens to step up and help create the better future we know is possible, and the future that young people deserve. This election is extremely important because who represents us in Ottawa makes a big difference.
Before going into the forum, we would like to go over the role that Taya and I will have as moderators. So we will introduce those asking the questions, indicate which candidate is to speak, and keep the speakers on message and on time. I will be helped in this important task by our fearless timekeeper, Jamie, who is from Fridays for Future West Kootenai. You might notice him holding up cards every once in a while to keep everyone on time. He will let you know at 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then when it is time. And I'll start with a few housekeeping items also. First, for the audience, attendees are automatically muted. We are here to listen. I also encourage everyone to put their cameras on so it can feel like we are all in a room together. One advantage of Zoom is that any real troublemakers can be put on mute, or in extreme cases can be kicked out of the Zoom meeting, although I am sure that won't be necessary. Also, please stick around to the end to participate in our exit poll.
And a few rules for the candidates before we begin. We ask that everyone be polite and respectful. Hate language or personal attacks will not be tolerated. Keep mics on mute when you're not speaking, and don't forget to unmute when it's your turn. Please refrain from interrupting the other candidates and wait for your turn to speak. Be respectful of time and do not go over the time period you have to answer a question. And please keep to the topic at hand.
Okay, so tonight we have 8 questions for the candidates, who each have 2.5 minutes to speak to each question. We will start with each candidate giving a quick 1-minute introduction, then move on to the questions. Once we've reached the end of the event tonight, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to deliver a closing statement. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the candidates. We are so grateful to have you all here tonight. In alphabetical order, by first name, please welcome Rana Nelson, Robin Goldsberry, Rob Morrison, and Wayne Stetsky. We will be rotating the order in which candidates speak throughout the questions. So each of you are given a chance to speak first and last. Just before beginning, the candidates participated in a random number generator to decide who will start. So for introductory remarks, Rana will go first, followed by Rob, then Robin, and then Wayne. You have 1 minute for an introduction. Rana, you may start us off.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Lynn. And thank you all for being here tonight. I'm the Green Party candidate for Kootenay, Columbia, and I live on the traditional territory of the Sinaiks, the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, and the Syilx in Revelstoke. And I am grateful for the beauty I see around me every single day. I'm a mom of 3 kids, a wife, and a community volunteer, and I know that we need to do things differently for our future. Greens around the world are guided by 6 values: sustainability, social justice, eco-wisdom, participatory democracy, respect for diversity, and nonviolence. These values are why I joined the Green Party and why I am running for MP. If we based our economy, our social system, and our community decisions on these values, we wouldn't have had the heat, fires, floods of this summer. We wouldn't have had people choosing between rent and food, and we wouldn't have families and cultures decimated by systemic racism. The Green Party platform of a green future, life with dignity, and a just society is an action plan to pull us back from the brink of total climate destruction, restore Canada's place in the world as a leader, and rewrite our social contract with each other. I look forward to tonight's debate. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Rana. And Rob, you may go next.
Well, thanks so much, Lynn. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm Rob Morrison, the Conservative candidate for Kootenay, Columbia, and I couldn't be happier than to be on this forum tonight. I have worked with the BC Youth on a petition that I presented, and I am serious about climate change and what we can do as a government. I believe the next government will have to make a huge impact, and the only government I can see that is going to be after this election will be the Conservative Party. I look so forward to working with you and helping you to get the goals that we need, which is some serious action, not just talk, action on how we can combat the climate change. Thank you so much. Appreciate being here.
All right. Thank you, Rob. And Robin, you may go now.
Hi there, I'm Robin and I'm with the Liberal Party. And I'm going to talk about the Liberal government's plan. It's a healthy environment and a healthy economy. It's the only detailed plan by a federal party that achieves our environmental goals and our economic hopes: clean air, clean water, and long-term secure jobs. It builds on the strengths and achievements of our existing programs, and there's a lot, while amping up our ambitions with new or strengthened federal measures. We are well on our way to exceed Canada's 2030 reduction goal, and we're doing it by maintaining our GDP. It is the only plan that mobilizes the full breadth of Canada's ingenuity and resources to reimagine a future that is secure, just, and clean. Every order of government, every sector of the economy, every community, every Canadian has a role to play in this moment of our shared history. And our 5-pillar plan is not an endpoint. Let's be driven by the opportunity to create a healthier planet, an economy that we can pass on to our children and grandchildren with confidence and pride.
All right. Thank you, Robin. And Wayne, you may do your introduction.
Good evening, Wayne Stetsky joining you tonight from the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Secwepemc, the Syilx, and the Sinaiks First Nations. Climate change is the #1 environmental crisis of our time. I've devoted my life to working with and for the environment, working with national parks, Manitoba parks, BC parks, and the BC Ministry of Environment. As your MP from 2015 to 2019, I was the NDP Shadow Cabinet Critic for National Parks, and I was Vice Chair of the House of Commons Environment Committee. In 2019, I was honored to be selected by GreenPAC as an environmental champion for Canada. And last week, I was named as a Climate Courage to Lead champion by Lead Now, one of only 9 candidates selected from over 1,000 candidates running in this election across Canada. It's a real honor to be selected as a climate champion, and I look forward to working as your member of parliament in Kootenay, Columbia.
Great. Thank you, Wayne. And now we can go into the questions. So Thea, you can take that. Thea, I think your mic is off.
100%, my mic was off. Thank you, and it's so nice to meet all of you. Let's get started with our questions. Please remember that we don't want to hear what candidates have done wrong. We want to hear your opinions on solutions. You'll have 2.5 minutes to answer the question, and our first one comes from Kate Watt from Columbia, yeah.
Hi. Scientific consensus is that the effects of climate change will become increasingly more devastating over the course of my lifetime. What climate actions are you already taking to protect the future of me and my peers? And what more will you do if you are elected?
Right, and for this question, we will have Rob first, and then Robin, and then Wayne, and then Rana.
Perfect. And what is our time limit on this question?
Sorry, 2.5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you, Kate, for that question. Canada's Conservatives have a serious plan to combat climate change that allows us to meet our targets and reduce emissions by 2030, all while repealing the carbon tax that we have today. We recognize the most efficient way to reduce emissions is using pricing mechanisms. We will fight climate change and protect the environment, but we won't do it on the backs of hardworking Canadians and hurting our economy. Instead of sending money to Ottawa, low carbon savings accounts, which I'll talk about, help Canadians make greener life choices while allowing them to decide what works best for them and their families. Canada's Conservatives are the only party with a plan to secure our environment, secure jobs, and secure the future. The low carbon savings accounts will be able to work with the provinces, and it's really important to work with the provinces, which is something we have to do across Canada to be effective. We will work with the provinces to implement an innovative and national personal low carbon savings account, which again will allow people to make choices that reduce emissions and what works best for them. We also have a zero emission vehicles. Public transport's important, but really we know from Kootenay, Columbia, that Canada is a big northern country where the idea of giving up a car or taking transit is impossible. So this makes electric and hydrogen vehicles essential for meeting our climate goal. Electric, a lot of you know that I'm working with a group out of Nelson and also out of Canal Flats on looking at a electric train, passenger train system that will not only do commuters from Nelson, Castlegar Trail, but also look at the tourism side of Canal Flats, Cranbrook, Creston, and into Nelson. And that will be a huge reduction in carbon, especially between Castlegar and Nelson. Another project I'm working on is a hydrogen, where a scientist I'm working with in Canal Flats, in the Columbia Valley. We're working on a pilot project where Columbia Valley corridor will be using transport trucks as a pilot on working on hydrogen. I have been committed to climate change. You know that I did a petition just before Parliament ended to stop ecocide, and I, as your representative, will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response, Rob. Robin, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Kate. Great question. I want to start at talking about what the government's done, what our federal government's done, and something that passed, got royal assent on June 30th of this year. It was one of the final acts that happened, was the Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. It is now the law. Future governments are now legally accountable to reduce emissions. This is enshrined in this law. And that means net zero emissions on or before 2050, meeting the Paris Agreement. That means by 2030, emissions levels are 40 to 45% below 2005 levels. Subsequent goals every year thereafter. There's got to be accountability and transparency from the governments, public consultation, independent reviews, and enshrined Indigenous knowledge in the climate accountability process. So that was big, because that's going to hold us responsible and accountable. Now, we also have an awesome 5-pillar plan that is detailed, tremendously detailed. It's reducing, one of the pillars is reducing energy waste in our homes, buildings, and industries. And we've started on numerous initiatives here, and we've got so much more in the works. There are literally a plethora of programs for Canadians to achieve greater energy efficiency, retrofit their homes, and so much more. Investing in long-term green infrastructure planning, energy grid modernization. So that's all under reducing energy waste in our homes, buildings, and industry. Then there's clean, affordable transportation and power. That's the second pillar. And there are programs, well, first off, all ZEVs by 2035. That means all new vehicles by 2035 are ZEVs. Electrifying public transportation, made in Canada hydrogen for heavy duty vehicles. Honestly, I can go on, and I am, but we've got a lot of this information at voterobin.ca. Pollution is no longer free. That a lot of people are very well aware. That's pillar 3. Pillar 4 is building Canada's clean industrial advantages. And there's all kinds of great programs there, right down to the critical minerals action plan, which is mining for production for batteries, solar panels. Again, time is up. I will just say the 5th one is embracing the power of nature. And that is everything from planting trees to protecting our old growth forests, which we have announced we will do.
Thank you very much, Robin. Wayne, same question. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. And I think the first part of it is, what have you done in the past? And of course, as your member of parliament in 2015 to 2019, I attended many of the youth-led climate action rallies across the riding. So impressed by the leadership of youth. And of course, it's their future, and we need to honor them by making sure that we have a climate that is livable going into the future. As your member of parliament, as I mentioned, I was vice chair of the Environment Committee, and we produced several reports around the climate change. I'll just hold them up very quickly. I'm not sure whether you can see them. Clean growth and climate change in Canada, forestry, agriculture, and waste, clean growth and climate change, how Canada can lead internationally. So these are very important reports. And I was very pleased to have Citizens Climate Lobby from the West Kootenays appear as experts at one of the committee members' meetings that we had. In terms of the party, I'll try and run through this, but I will direct you to my website at the end of today. We have a long list. There's 10 pages on our platform dealing with the environment. Demonstrating climate leadership by reducing our emissions by at least 50% from 2005 levels by 2030, by eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, putting in carbon budgets, changing the mandate of the Bank of Canada to focus on contributing to net zero emissions, creating 1 million new green jobs. I've met with unions across Canada when I was your MP. There are many, many, many good jobs waiting for us under the new green economy. Creating a national crisis strategy to help communities reduce and respond to climate risks. Our municipalities very much need and want to be part of a better future for our climate. Creating a new climate core of young workers so we can harness all of that energy that they have about a better future for them and for the climate. Electric transportation, electric buses between communities, enshrining an environmental bill of rights in law. Hard to believe that Canada does not have an environmental bill of rights. We deserve one. Putting UNDRIP into action, creating an Office of Environmental Justice to address the disproportionate impacts of pollution. appointing a climate emergency committee of cabinet. And from my perspective, as much as possible, we need to get climate crisis out of politics and into the hands of science and experts, similar to what was set up to deal with COVID. Provincial and federal committees with authority and the ability to implement change that will benefit the climate in the long run. So there's lots more in our platform, and I will direct you to that later on in our get together today.
All right, thanks, Wayne. Time's up.
Yeah, thanks very much, Wayne. Rana, same question, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Taya. It's great to see the other parties adopting policies that the Green Party has been touting for years. And thank you, Katie, for this question and your help with the signs in the Columbia Valley. Nice to see you on Zoom. So the Green Party platform just came out, recently released yesterday. I'll put up the link in the chat afterwards. And so what we have been doing is continually pushing for more than what has been happening so far, because we are where we are now because of we haven't gone far enough. So Elizabeth May had made a number of amendments to Bill C-12, most of which were not adopted. And we need to keep pushing for that. We are going to commit to 60% of our decreasing our emissions by 2050 and getting to net negative thereafter. So the other issue for this is, again, as I mentioned in the introduction, the basis of our economy. We are basing our economy on an infinitely growing model, infinite resources, which we don't have. That's like having all the money in the world and just keep spending it. We have a limited amount of time before we reach our carbon budget max, and we need to take some serious action on that. So that also includes, yes, electric transport, especially here in Kootenay, Columbia. We know that we have limited transport between communities, and we use one person, most of the time in our cars. There's no reason why BC Hydro could get to group buses to go up to Mica and Revelstoke Dams when they do their shift change. I was in Elkford over the weekend and saw the coal buses pull out to the sites, which covered in coal dust isn't the greatest thing to see, but at least everybody's not driving up there one by one. The other commitments we are making is to ban fracking. Other parties have not said they will do this, and of course, switching over to away from oil and gas over to green energy. Corporate welfare is an interesting phrase to describe the subsidies to oil and gas that currently exist. If we moved all those over 18 billion, I believe last year, to green energy, we will create more jobs and that are currently occurring, and we will protect the oil and gas workers in the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Lynn, I'll hand it over to you for our next question.
All right, thanks. Our second question comes from Sue Cairns at the Cranbrook Climate Hub. And then the speaker order for this question is going to be Robin, then Wayne, then Rana, and then Rob. So Sue, please ask your question.
Great, thank you. So my question is, first, the setup. The UN Secretary General described the latest IPCC report on climate change as a code red for humanity and a death knell for coal and fossil fuels. This is a three-part question. First, do you agree that we need to take immediate and sweeping action on the decarbonization of industry? The second part is, what time frame do you see for transitioning energy systems away from fossil fuels? And thirdly, how would you support workers who are affected by these changes?
All right. Robin, you may answer first.
So the Innovation Panel on Climate Change and their code red. And we do have a climate crisis. It is undeniable. And unlike some parties in the government, we as Liberals are committed to acting on the carbon crisis, the climate crisis that we're now facing. In Kootenay, Columbia alone, we're looking at temperature increases of between 2 and 4 degrees over the next few years. We're looking at wetter winters, drier summers. We're looking at fires, smoke, all kinds of things that are happening. We're having to adapt to climate change now, as opposed to just mitigating it. We're in that, and this is something that is intergovernmental. It's a little more complicated than just the federal government coming down, because a lot of this is controlled or run by the provinces. And I think Rob alluded to this earlier. It's essential that as a federal government, we are kind of like the parents and saying to the provinces, as we're handing out allowances, as we're going to them, we're saying it is imperative that we start moving forward. Now, I'm just, immediate decarbonization is, we're working on it. The thing is, and you mentioned jobs, we have to balance a healthy economy with a healthy environment. And that balance takes a tremendous amount of effort, a tremendous amount of detail. And it's really easy to put idealistic ideas out there, but to actually put them in place. We're the only party that has a plan that addresses the next 30 years. The NDP, and we're working to transition tremendously. The NDP is, their plan is really nice, but it's short on detail, and it's short on how we're going to get there. And that's why the Liberal plan is so important, because it is addressing these details. I mean, for a healthy environment for the workers, and ensuring that we not only have a clean, safe, secure environment, but we have good jobs for people out there as well. And there's a ton of that in a healthy environment and a healthy economy.
All right, thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
And Wayne, you have the floor.
Thank you. And just so that history is actually reflected, it was Jack Layton that introduced the very first climate change bill into Parliament in 2007. Elizabeth May came to Parliament in 2011. So absolutely, there is a climate crisis that we were dealing with now, and we need to transition to a different and a better future. And better is absolutely possible. I met with unions in Ottawa, and looking at some of the information they provided recently through the labor network, there's a great deal of interest in transitioning away from oil and gas and coal jobs into other kinds of jobs. Examples given, people that are currently working on pipelines, for example, could work on replacing the water and sewer infrastructure that we absolutely need replaced in most of our communities. As you know, I was mayor of Cranbrook from 2011 to 2014. But it needs to be done, first of all, by talking with the people working in the industry. You know, it's no good to sit there and say, we need to move to a green economy, a green energy future, without actually sitting down with the people that currently work in those industries and talk to them about the future, about how they can move towards a better future through retraining, perhaps in some cases through early retirement. But you don't get there unless you set objectives and start moving towards it. So, the Chamber of Commerce, both the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the BC Chamber of Commerce, have a number of really interesting proposals on how we can move to a better future, both for the environment and the climate, but also for workers in British Columbia and across Canada. So we need to move to a greener economy. We need to have a transition in place, a plan that works for people. And we need to start by having very serious conversations with people that are currently working in oil, gas, and coal industries so that they can see themselves in a different and a better future.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. And Rana, you have the floor.
Thank you for the question, Sue. So the first part of that question is, do you agree that we need to take immediate and sweeping action on decarbonization of industry? And yes, I do. So the second part is the timeframe for transitioning energy systems away from fossil fuels. And the green plan is for a phase out of the bitumen from between 2030 and 2035. So certainly we're not turning off the tap overnight, and absolutely, Wayne, we are involving the communities that are currently working in these industries, as well as Indigenous communities and vulnerable populations. I was in Elkford on the weekend. As I mentioned, I was speaking to one woman who has lived there for 16 years, and she told me that 90% of workers in coal would prefer to be doing something else, and they're wanting jobs to feed their families, like we all do, meaningful work. And so absolutely these conversations need to take place. She also said that the youth of these communities are going out and becoming educated in ways to make that transition and then coming back, which I found very heartening. It's certainly not well taken to waltz into a community and say, well, that's it, everything you guys do is terrible, and here's how you're going to change. That's not respectful, and that's not a Green Party plan either. So support workers who are affected by these changes. Yes, Wayne, you mentioned early retirement. That's part of our plan as well. Retraining, matching job for job, well-paying fossil fuel job for well-paying green energy job. I worked in Work BC in matching employees to employers. And so I realized that you need to take a wraparound approach to these changes and really make a difference by matching skills to interests. The other aspect of that is, sorry, just checking my notes here. You'll forgive me if I haven't memorized the entire platform in 36 hours. So requiring federal public investment funds and others to divest from fossil fuels. We need to set an example as the government, as a green leader. Oh, time's up. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rana. And Rob, you may respond to the question.
Perfect. And the first question is, do we need to take immediate action? The answer is yes, we need action, not words. We need a government that's going to do something, not say they will and do nothing. And we need a strong economy, though. We do need economic recovery as a priority. We need the tax dollars to help us with innovation, to help us develop a cleaner, greener fossil fuels. We don't have that right now. We need a panel of experts, scientists, to help us and guide us in how we can produce cleaner, greener energy. And really, when we talk about energy transition, yes, we need, number one is renewables. We need to focus on renewables, and we also need to focus on natural gas and nuclear energy. The final one that we asked was about the training, and that I think is paramount. I mean, I know I have some relatives working in the energy sector, and they right now are already starting to train. I know one large oil company is looking at renewables, focusing away from our historic oil and gas, that these companies are working on their own to move forward. But, you know, Canada's Conservatives right now will introduce a tax credit to rapidly accelerate the deployment of the carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology into the energy sector and important industries that have few alternatives to burning fossil fuels, like fertilizer and chemical production from our sectors that are producing agriculture. Conservatives appreciate that we can't build a greener future if Canadians don't have jobs. We will invest in a direct air capture, a promising new future Canadians have, a technology that Canada developed to capture carbon dioxide from the air, and Canada is a technological leader in that. In total, we're investing $5 billion in CCUS. With that, the Conservatives have a plan, not just action. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Rob. Just want to take 1 second to recognize that there are 104 people in this Zoom call, so it's a very good turnout. minus the 4 candidates. That's an even 100 people learning about the climate crisis from all you folks. So thank you. All right, Taya, take it away.
Awesome. Well, our next question comes from Zoe Dancer from the Kimberley Youth Action Network's Environmental Action Team. The speaker order for this question will be Wayne, Rana, Rob, and then Robin. Zoe, we're ready for your question.
Hi. Our question is, how does your party plan to deal with the mental health issues associated with climate change that lay heavily on my generation?
Big one. Wayne, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your leadership. As I said, I've been so impressed over a number of years now with the youth leadership shown around climate change and caring for the environment and the future. So one of the things that we need to focus on, of course, is, and we have it in our platform, is a climate youth core to help work on the environment. And I think to some degree, having that kind of employment is helpful to mental health. But right now, mental health in Canada in general is in really, really bad shape. As you know, healthcare is primarily a provincial responsibility, but the federal government puts billions of dollars into healthcare every year. And to me, they have shortchanged the mental health side of things for decades. The federal government can put conditions when they are transferring money to the provinces. And so they can tell the provinces that you must put a lot more focus on mental health in general, and of course, mental health for our youth. COVID-19, of course, has added to mental health issues across Canada and really around the world. So absolutely, we need far more money and energy and time put into mental health, not only for youth, but for everyone in the end in Canada. We are not where we should be. So absolutely, finding good employment, I think, for youth in climate and energy related jobs is helpful because people like to feel good about the work that they're doing. So green energy jobs for our youth are important, but overall, much more funding needed for mental health in Canada, including for our youth.
Thank you so much. Rana, same question.
Hi, Zoe, thank you. Mental health is also a big component of the Green Party platform. When I worked in family support for the BC Schizophrenia Society, I saw how important it was that you're not only helping the people with mental health challenges, but whole families as well. It takes a toll on everybody. And certainly the climate crisis is affecting all of us. The levels of anxiety from the smoke and the fires this summer and the instability of the way we live now is very taxing. So in response to your question, the Greens will establish a national mental health strategy and a suicide prevention strategy to prioritize the expansion of mental health and rehabilitation services, and that mental health services are medically necessary. We need to allocate increased federal money into community-based mental health care. And all of this goes along with doing the work to reduce the stigma, which has come a long way for sure. We are acknowledging that the great challenges that we all face. We also need to increase investments in Indigenous-led mental health, which is certainly another big issue. A better understanding of how mental health affects the brain and brain development as well, especially in women who are pregnant at this time, and how the stresses on the body and the mind affect the growing child. That's also important. Youth mental health is a specific note in the Green Platform. It's number 4 under there. Provides specific funding for early mental health interventions, including social, emotional learning programs, quality early childhood education, and more access to community-based mental health services. So in the Revelstoke High School, students can go into the office of the counselors at any time and just take some space. It's a very open and inclusive environment. And again, well accepted that if you're just taking a break, that's what you need, that's fine. We support the different requirements of people for that. And community supportive housing, when our basic needs are not being met, shelter, food, we can't think of anything else, which of course is the underpinnings of all of our anxiety. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much. Rob, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks very much. The pandemic has deepened Canada's mental health crisis, especially for our youth. Jobs, being at home, being locked out. It's estimated 1 in 5 Canadians are suffering from depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Canada's Conservatives will address the mental health issue by recognizing that the mental health is a health and making historic investments to help those in need. With the Canada's Mental Health Action Plan, the Conservatives will massively boost health transfers to the provinces by 6%. This will be $60 billion for more health care over the next 10 years. Working with provinces to invest in mental health as a priority is the goal by providing enough funding through health transfers for an additional 1 million Canadians to receive mental health treatment every year. And like I mentioned earlier, working with the provinces is a priority. Encouraging employees to add mental health coverage to their employee benefit program or boost coverage by offering a tax credit of 25% for the cost of additional mental health coverage for the first 3 years. Providing $150 million over the 3 years in grants and nonprofits, charities delivering mental health and wellness programming. And of course, we've brought into Parliament creating a 3-digit suicide prevention hotline. Making the single largest investment in Canadian history for mental health supports the Indigenous people by providing $1 billion over 5 years to boost funding for Indigenous mental health and drug treatment programs, including providing cultural appropriate supports. And I just want to talk a second too about the opioid crisis, which is part of this as well. We need to focus it. The opioid crisis is a serious crisis that we need to focus on. And just by putting people in jail for repeat offenders is not it. We need to provide support for those who are addicted. And I've worked with one of our Indigenous groups in our community. They've got a home that they can have for looking after those in need that need the support of a rehab type unit. And all they need is funding from the federal government to help. The Conservatives are here to fund those programs, and I've worked with those people. We'll fund them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that response. Robin, finish us off.
Well, thank you, Zoe. And that's a great question. And I've got a master's degree in neuroscience. I've got a BSc in psychology science. And I can truly appreciate the effects of and the stress and how it's affecting people, and especially our young people. And I can tell you the best way that we can start alleviating that stress is by working an ambitious plan to solve the climate crisis here in Canada. And that's what I'm committed to do. Now, we have billions committed, 4.5 billion committed over the next 4 years to mental health programs. I just want to say the Conservative, when they say 6%, they're saying 16 billion they're going to give to the provinces to determine. We're telling the provinces what they need to do with this money, okay? And that's important because mental health is a massive issue, and we've been working on this in the Liberal Party for years and years. It was the top priority in 2018, next to pharmacare. It is top of our list right now, and the government is acting. There have been a ton of programs that have been implemented. Unfortunately, COVID has hijacked some of these initiatives. And I can tell you this, now that we're almost at the end, it is important that we move ahead, and we move ahead swiftly and passionately on the climate plan, the detailed plan that's going to take us right straight through to meet those emissions, to those targets, to meet our goals, and to actually work so that we can feel more confident in our future, that we can achieve what we need to achieve in order to help people and our young people feel better about where we are going. And so we're the ones with the plan. We've got a very detailed plan. It's extremely ambitious, and it takes us into the future. And I just want to impress, in terms of mental health, we have an amazing 5-point opioid program. We've to address the opioid crisis. We've got all kinds of things in the works for mental health. Huge priority for me. And I want to say I really appreciate that question because it is dear and near to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lynn, I'll hand it off to you for our next question.
All right, thanks, Taya. So our fourth question comes from Judy O'Leary from the Citizens Climate Lobby, Nelson West Kootenay. And the speaker order for this will be Rana, then Rob, then Robin, and then Wayne. So Judy, you may ask your question.
Thanks, Lynn. My question is that in the midst of the climate and biodiversity crisis, there's been a lot of discussion, but not enough real action. Can you tell us what you personally have accomplished to bring about systemic change that is needed to address the climate and biodiversity crisis? If you could tell us how your efforts have resulted in the implementation of solutions, and I'd like you to identify accomplishments that you have had, not those of your party or another group, but you. Thank you.
Okay, Rana, you may begin.
Thank you, Judy. I'm just going to take a minute to read the question. There's a lot of elements in there. Okay, so personally, my work to bring about systemic change on climate and diversity, or sorry, biodiversity, is to run for MP of the Green Party. That is why I'm doing this. I know that certainly my individual efforts contribute, but not enough. I can recycle, I can ride my bike, I can use my Kootenay car share membership. But why I am running is because I see that we need what was alluded to earlier, the sweeping systemic change for business and government to make the difference to address our carbon emissions. So my specific efforts have not yet resulted in any implementation of solutions. And that's what I'm working to have happen. So whether or not I am the next MP, I will still continue to do that. And this campaign has highlighted the need for electoral reform, as well as electrical reform, by the way, because that is how we are going to get true representation in Parliament, when we have the percentages of people who actually are mirrored in Ottawa. And so that is something to work on in between campaigns for all of us, if we all truly care about having accurate representation. The other thing that continues to need work is all of our individual efforts. We know that no real social change has come about unless the citizens stand up and make noise. This is with the civil rights protests. This is with women getting the vote. This is with what's happening at Fairy Creek and Revolution north of Revelstoke right now, is that you can write letters, you can talk to your MP, and those are important steps, but you have to stand up and make noise, because power doesn't like to give it up. And so that's what I encourage all of you to do, is to get involved in some way in the causes that are dear to you. And that's what I will continue to do as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rana. And Rob, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks so much. And as you're a member of Parliament for the last 2 years, I was focusing on the electric train. I talked a little bit about that, and that actually was started in Nelson. And where it takes leadership is to take that, not just talk, but some action. And that is a bit of a slow process, slower than I wanted it to be. I presented that, asked for some funding from the federal government, did not get it on round one. I now have a funder from Canal Flats who will fund a pilot project for me to move forward with the electric train, a small 24 passenger type train that's going to travel around. And I think that's where it's action. It's not just talk. It's where you actually step up and do it. I know I was asked a couple of times when I was in Nelson, well, what's this conservative doing with this electric train? Well, it doesn't necessarily mean to be a conservative. And I know as a member of parliament and others like Wayne, who hasn't been a member of parliament, it's nonpartisan. When we're elected, we respond in nonpartisan on what's good for Kootenay, Columbia. And for me, it was like implementing an electric train or trying to get that electric train going. The other part I worked on is working with hydrogen on that hydrogen pilot project for transport trucks up the Columbia Valley. Now, that's really unique. And I didn't really know a lot about the hydrogen. So I sat down with a couple scientists and listened to them and found that they had a great idea on how we can move forward on doing something different that we hadn't done before with hydrogen. So, you know, just to be innovative, to look at how we can do a better job. And for me personally, with our energy sector, we can do a lot better. We can have cleaner, greener energy for sure. We need to move forward. And again, I'll say it again, my number one focus is renewables. I want to focus on how we can use renewables moving forward. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Robin, you may take the question.
Hello. Well, I have been a member of environmental societies going back to before they were even something there. East Kootenay Environmental. I owned a value-added forestry business, and we instituted the ecologically friendly harvesting techniques for forest botanicals that are in use today by the BC government. And we were value added. We worked in the forest. We were trying to show the government ways we could have a smaller impact, a smaller footprint, and yet still have economic viability. It was a great business. At peak point, 40 employees. We were a going concern, shipping all over the world. Also, I was a big part of the committee to save Queens Bay when the provincial government announced that they were going to move the ferry to the only one of the few shallow bays on Kootenay Lake. I was a major part of the team that put together. We had the electric ferry now. We've got charging stations, and we managed to save Queens Bay in the Choose Balfour program that we worked so hard on. I also want to talk about the electric train that Mr. Morrison talks about, because I've been on that committee and been working with that for years and years and years, you know, dating back to before Mr. Morrison joined politics in our region. And I want to say that it's a great project. It's many years down the road. We're still waiting for some technology to be invented for that one. We need action now on that. And I think there's a need for a lot more work on that. And certainly transportation is an issue that needs to be addressed right away. Electric buses, you know, and looking at some of the other alternatives from a transportation perspective are really, really important at this time. Another thing I'd like to mention is I'm connected. A few months ago, I got a phone call for a Skype call from Jonathan Wilkinson. He's the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. And he said, Robin, what's going on in the Kootenays? And I literally took my phone and showed him the worst air quality, some of the worst in the world. And I'm going, there's a lake over there. There's a, you know, we talked about what we needed to do to adapt to the climate change issues we're facing now. And the point is he announced several weeks later, he announced that we would have more action, more firefighters, more firefighting equipment. So I think those connections and things that I've been doing, there's more. I noticed my time is up, so thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Robin. And Wayne, you can answer the question now.
All right, thank you very much. Great question. So when I was with the Ministry of Environment looking after parks and ecosystems, one of the things that my staff were doing, were working on trying to make all industrial projects more ecologically friendly. And that was an important part of the job, really. I think one that is missing today. As regional manager, I brought in the 0 horsepower restriction on the Columbia River wetlands. And then when I was member of parliament, brought in the 20 horsepower restriction on the main stem of the Columbia River to try and keep that incredible area relatively natural and undisturbed. Of course, worked on expanding protected areas. In the past, protected areas are carbon sinks, and we need more. We want to get to 30% by 2030. And again, when I was on the Environment Committee, we produced a report on how to move Canada forward around protected areas. Indigenous protected and conserved areas are definitely an important way to move forward in the future. I also started the all-party cycling caucus in Ottawa, inviting other MPs and senators to come out on their bicycles and working towards making Canada a cycling nation. I participated in youth climate rallies, and I was thinking further on that mental health question. I think one of the things that can help youth is knowing that they truly have an environmental champion representing them as their member of parliament every day. Not just when it's convenient, but every day, and living and having worked my life, as you know, with the environment, I think just knowing that is helpful to youth who are struggling with mental health and climate change. When I was mayor of Cranbrook, I was able to keep the carbon tax money so we could start changing out the street lights and putting in LED lights. And putting in charging stations, which were badly needed. Cranbrook didn't have any at the time, so pushing charging stations was really important to me as mayor. And I developed relationships with ministers because I am nonpartisan when I'm in Ottawa. So with the Environment Minister, both Minister McKenna and Minister Wilkinson, so that I could continue to work with them, get answers to constituents' questions, and help move important projects forward here in the Kootenays over the last 2 years, even when I wasn't your member of parliament. So really want to get back to work for you.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. And just before we go off again, I'll give you another numbers update because I've been told by our awesome tech team that including all the people in this Zoom room and then all the people tuning in on our YouTube and Facebook live streams, there are 160 people tuned in, not including the candidates. So there's 160 households tuned into this event. All right, Taya, take it away.
That turnout's awesome. Our fifth question, comes from Tracy Mitchell and Noah Coe from Wildsight Youth Climate Corps. The speaker order for this question will be Rob, then Robin, then Wayne, then Raina. Tracy and Noah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. As young people, we face many challenges. In particular, rural youth like us face unique barriers such as lack of access to transportation, resulting in the requirement to own a vehicle, lack of access to affordable housing options, resulting in the requirement to continually share rent to remain financially stable, and the difficulty in accessing meaningful education and employment opportunities to combat these barriers, especially for the specialized fields involved in climate action.
We love where we live. It is one of the most beautiful places in Canada and is unique in the scale of nature that is still left here. Intact, healthy ecosystems have an important role to play in mitigating climate change and safeguarding climate resilience. They too are at risk if we fail to act. We want to stay here and lead efforts to address climate change for the sake of our region and the world, but for reasons we've outlined, we may not be able to do so. To advance our careers and establish secure livelihoods, we may be forced to move away to bigger cities, leaving Kootenay Columbia to face climate change without the energy we have to offer. What will you, the candidates, do to help young people stay in our homes and continue to champion local climate solutions? Thank you.
There we go, sorry. Thank you guys very much for your question. Rob, whenever you're ready.
You know, great question, and I've lived this for a long time. The divide between rural and urban, and a lot of the people in the urban areas don't really understand a lot of what we're living with when we're in the rural areas, like traveling over the Selma Crest and no cell service, limited internet service, so very difficult for people to go online, university courses, for example, and it really makes it difficult. You're right in bringing up the fact that lack of access has made it so difficult for us. And I know we've talked about, a lot of people have talked about having internet access, high-speed internet in our rural areas, but we still don't have that. We still don't have cell service in some of our areas. And that's what makes it challenging. It makes it so difficult for our youth to stay and live in our communities. And really, I'm one thing maybe that's good about the COVID-19 is people have realized that coming out to our area, and you've probably seen a lot of people move into the rural areas because they can work from home if we have the proper access. Our issues now are becoming affordable housing. And I've heard that through all the chambers I've been to, whether it's Golden or Invermere or Nelson. The lack of affordable housing for our youth is unbelievable. And we need good, strong leadership from a federal government to actually do something about affordable housing. Not talk about it, not to spend money, but the results are the number of homes that we can actually build so that we can have the youth go into those homes and make it affordable so they will stay in our communities, especially entry level. If you talk entry level people, like in our hospitality and tourism sectors, they struggle because they can't afford to live in our tourism type communities because it's so expensive. So we need to actually do something solid, which means action, not talking about it. And it's like access to employment. We have so much innovation. I mean, I look at one area like even Nelson itself. Our innovation and our people are really smart, and we're doing some really great stuff. We just need to keep our youth there, to live in our community, stay there, grow up with their families. I mean, we all live here. Everyone on this call lives in the Kootenay, Columbia, because they love it here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your response. Robin, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Tracy and Noah. I want you to stay here too. If anything, one of my greatest reasons why I'm involved in this is so that we keep our Kootenay, Columbia, our young people here, keep us vital. And that has been a sentiment I have been championing for many, many, many years in the Liberal Party. Rural vitality in our local communities. And I want to say COVID has been helpful in some ways because we're found we can actually connect without being in the same room. We can do things, and I from an education perspective, there are so many cool things there that are coming forward. And then we have the Liberals have a fantastic national housing strategy that was implemented in 2017. And this has got a three-pronged approach to it. And I'm really excited because it applies to us right here in the Kootenays. Because it's really hard to even keep a job if you can't find a house. And so many young people don't. I own a restaurant on Kootenay Lake, and I've had to do staff accommodation. I've had to do all kinds of things to try and just encourage people to stay. So I think that our national housing strategy, which is to build more homes, to build more social housing, to the College of the Rockies recently had their new residence built there. There's some social housing that the federal government has funded, helped fund in Nelson. There's a whole number of projects to build more, and we need someone championing this. We need someone fighting for us, saying, okay, we need more housing. We need more of this stuff here. I also think I also want to say that we've also got a number of programs to make it more affordable to buy a house. And there's doubling the first-time home owners, tax incentives, a tax-free savings account, rent-to-own programs. There's just a plethora, and the biggest one, CMHC charges, which are the insurance costs on when you buy a house. We want to reduce them by 25%. So we're doing things to reduce the average home purchase by about $30,000. So more houses and more building and more opportunities to make things affordable so we can move forward for everyone here. I want our young people, urban migration.
Robin, I just want to remind you that your time's up here. So if you
I can't see
in a couple sentences.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Urban migration is a huge, huge issue for us in Kootenay, Columbia. And I can tell you this, I will fight tooth and nail to keep our young people here and to keep us vital and keep this the best place to live in Canada.
Thank you very much. Wayne, we'll pass it off to you.
Thank you. Great question. And we absolutely want to keep you here in the Kootenays. It is one of the most beautiful parts of Canada and, quite frankly, the world. And we need you here to make sure that we have a good future. So how do we do that? Well, in terms of affordable housing, after climate change, I've been traveling the riding for over a month now. The lack of affordable housing is the second issue that comes up everywhere. It keeps people from personally being able to have a roof over the head, but it also keeps businesses from being more successful. So absolutely, we need to address affordable housing. We have a plan to build at least 500,000 new affordable homes across Canada over the next 10 years. And that has to be done in partnership. So that has to be the federal government providing funding, working with the provinces, working with municipalities, and working with local housing associations. It is being done, but we need a lot more of it. In terms of education in general, we need interest-free loans. The federal government still makes billions of dollars off of our students. So we need interest-free federal loans. We need more scholarships. We need more grants. And we need our institutions like College of the Rockies and Selkirk College to be working directly with green industries to basically train people for a green energy future, a green economy future, right here in the Kootenays. And that has to be done in partnership as well. Transit, absolutely. We need transit between our communities. I would prefer electric buses, but quite frankly, we have been shortchanged on transit funding compared to urban areas for many years. So we need to demand better and more in the way of transit dollars. High-speed internet, there's been a fair bit of progress over the last few years, but we still have too many individuals that are not able to access high-speed internet around the Kootenays, so we need to focus funding on that. We need to expand jobs for youth. So the Youth Climate Corps is a great example that's currently operating out of Nelson. And if we move to green energy future, then we have green local jobs, and that's through things like solar energy, geothermal energy, that happens right here in our communities. Jobs retrofitting homes and businesses. Those are important green jobs for a future that can keep kids right here at home. Agriculture, I don't want to leave out agriculture. I had an important bill that had 100% support in the House of Commons when I was your MP.
And Wayne, I want to remind you that your time is up here, so if you could finish up in a couple sentences.
Absolutely. We need to put more money into agriculture to secure our food, local food security going ahead in the future, and youth can play a major part in those jobs as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Rana, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Tracy and Noah. My fellow candidates I agree with all of the what people have brought up. It's true, we need everything: housing, increased education, better transit, more trade apprenticeships as well, working to a co-op model, which strengthens communities. Absolutely online learning, but we see that our community ties are decreased with online learning, not to mention screen fatigue, which I'm sure we're all experiencing these days. So we also need to make one-on-one and in-person engagement are occurring as well, and co-ops definitely help with that. So, and to touch on agriculture, yes, increased land for farming available for those who want to get into agriculture. That strengthens our local food networks. Mentorships, so succession planning for youth to take over existing small businesses as well. And as well, a guaranteed livable income is what the Green Party is, one of our pillars, because to offset these housing costs, we also know that having those basic needs met, that security will fill in the blanks sort of the patchworks of social programs that exist, and that have been very successful in other jurisdictions. And the other one is lowering the voting age. Youth you're bearing the consequences of all our previous decisions. And so you're very involved in this, but you can't even cast your ballot on September 20th or in the advance polls or request a mail-in ballot. And so that is key. You're going to be the most affected by the planet that we leave behind. And so you need to have a say in what goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. Great responses. Lynn, I'll pass it off to you for our next question.
All right, thanks a bunch, Taya. Our sixth question comes from Dr. Kyle Merritt from the new Kootenai organization, Doctors and Nurses for Planetary Health. And the speaker order for this question is going to be Robin, then Wayne, then Rana, and then Rob. So Dr. Merritt, we're ready for you.
Thanks everybody for the opportunity. The World Health Organization has said that climate change is the 21st century's greatest threat to public health. This past summer, we've seen climate chaos across the globe, including, of course, at home here with heat dome, drought, wildfires. As physicians in the Kootenays, we've seen the effects directly on our patients. I work in the emergency department, and I've treated patients with respiratory, heat-related illness, and mental health conditions as a result of the climate crisis. Historically, Canada has delayed meaningful action, continuing to be one of the worst polluters in the world. According to the IPCC report that's been referenced in other questions, we are now on a tight timeline to avoid the worst effects of climate change. We recognize this is going to be very difficult and is going to require strong and coordinated government action. My question is focused on this sense of urgency. If elected, what action would you take in the first 100 days? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Merritt. And Robin, you have the floor.
That's a great question, Dr. Kyle. I know that in the first 100 days, you can actually do an awful lot. And I think it's really, really super, super important that as a government, we sit down and we push to ensure that climate change is top of the list. We have got an exceptional plan. This is a plan that Andrew Weaver, who is one of Canada's top climate change scientists, has said is the only credible plan at the federal level. So I think it's important that we get into government, number one, and that we act on that plan. And I can tell you myself personally, I will be pushing for it. My focus is in particular Kootenai, Columbia. There are a plethora of programs that are available to us. What we have to ensure is somebody is taking the time and the energy to pour through these and ensure that we're getting them here and now. I know from a healthcare perspective too, that's a huge, huge issue. And it's really, really important that we address the doctor shortages and the Liberals do have a plan to do that in healthcare. And I know I'm diverting this question a little bit, but I do want to let you know the plan is let's train 7,500 new doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners. Let's work on getting those wait lists shortened and those surgical procedures that are backlogged so far, bring them back so that there's reasonable timeframes there. Virtual healthcare is another thing that we're really, really pushing for. And another thing on the agenda in our $10 billion in extra plan for healthcare, and that doesn't include mental health care, is local Kootenai, Columbia access to a doctor, because we all deserve access to a doctor and a nurse and a healthcare team. And they're doing things like forgiving student loans. If you come practice here, they're helping people set up practices. So I think healthcare is a huge, huge issue. And I just want you to know that as a Liberal government, we want to address it. And that is right up there next to climate change, which I will be sitting at the table and working with my colleagues to ensure that we are following the plan and we are pushing to do even better.
All right, thank you, Robin. And Wayne, you can respond to the question next.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for the work that you do every day. And I'd like to shout out to all of our healthcare practitioners that are working through very difficult circumstances, both in terms of climate, but of course also in terms of COVID and the various challenges that we're facing there. So you are very much appreciated. So in terms of the first 100 days, first thing I would do is cancel the oil and gas subsidies. The estimates range anywhere from 900 million to well over $1 billion a year going to subsidize oil and gas. Rather than just putting that money back into the coffers, though, I would like to see that money go to research and development in green energy sector. There's some great opportunities there, particularly around both solar and geothermal energy, but we need to put some additional money into the industry to develop better and newer technology. So that was one of the first things I would do, but I would keep the money, but I would rechannel it into green energy. We've talked about fighting climate change, and of course, all of tonight is about fighting climate change, and you want to make sure that you have a true champion representing you in Ottawa to fight the climate crisis every day. I've talked about forming what I guess a climate caucus. So if I get to Ottawa, I tend to think that Parliament will be focused. You would think Parliament would be focused on the climate crisis going forward. And I will certainly do my best to make sure that it's kept front and center in caucus, in Parliament. But if not, I'm interested in forming an all-party caucus around climate change. So inviting members from all parties, Conservative, Liberal, Green, Bloc, to join together to make sure that we keep a focus on climate change. Because I know there are individuals, MPs from every party that will take climate change seriously. So forming a climate caucus is something I'd be willing to do. I'd like to ensure that physicians are part of the committees. Now, I've talked briefly about getting climate change out of politics as much as possible, and I use COVID-19 as a model that we could use for climate change, where we set up provincial committees and federal committees across the country, give them some authority, give them some money, and put them to work on the climate crisis. So physicians absolutely should be members.
Wayne, just so you know, your time is up. If you want to wrap it up. Are you good?
No, again, I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing for all of us every day.
All right. And is everybody seeing Jamie all right? Holding up the cards? You might want to adjust the size of your tab or something to see if you can make sure everyone can see all the people who are highlighted here on the screen, and that includes Jamie, who's holding up the cards. All right, and Rana, you are next to address the question. Feel free.
Thanks, Lynn. Thank you, Dr. Merritt. Yes, we know that the health of ourselves depends on the health of the planet. And so this includes, as you mentioned, the heat and the wildfires, and the drought. And it also includes dealing with pesticides and agricultural chemicals. All of these factors are part of our planet's crisis at the moment. So in the first 100 days for the Green government, we would expand the Canada Health Act. We want to include pharmacare. That was a promise that has been made in the past and hasn't panned out. So we committed to include that. We're the only industrialized nation with a Medicare type system that doesn't include pharmacare. Now we need to increase health transfers to the provinces and basing them on the needs in each province. So yes, you're right. This requires coordinated government action between the feds and provincial governments, as well as across parties. Climate change does not discriminate. And we need to move away from our antagonistic approach that we have to the parties and figure out what is best for the common good. And we need to bring ourselves together to work for that common good. The coordinated health action includes mental health, as has been addressed earlier in this discussion. It also includes Indigenous health. So we know that Indigenous people are one of the most affected by our climate and by health issues. And so that also includes implementing the recommendations from the UN's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It includes making sure that those communities have clean water, adequate housing, and safe housing. As far as no mold in the communities that we've lived in up in Telegraph Creek and in Tofino, a lot of the housing on reserve is in very, very poor conditions. And so health includes where we live, what we eat, what we breathe. And the beauty of the Green Party is they recognize that all of these issues are interconnected. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Rana. And Rob, the floor is yours.
Lynn. Perfect. Thanks, Lynn. And thanks, Dr. Merritt. Appreciate the question. You know, you were talking a little bit about the drought and the fires and living in Creston and traveling throughout the Kootenays during the fires. It was pretty horrific. I mean, people were having trouble breathing. It was something that we have to look at and say, what could we have done differently? And our forest fire fighters did an amazing job fighting hard to put the fires out. But in many cases, they just couldn't do it because it was just out of control. We need to start looking and working with our provincial partners and the federal government take some leadership on how can we do a bit better job on forestry management, because obviously we're struggling there. Now, do we need to do control burns? How do we do that so that we don't have the massive fires that we've had over the last few years? And it seems to be every couple of years we get into that. So I think it's important in the first 100 days to start looking at the wildfires in BC and how can we work with our provincial government to do some work to make it that we make some recommendations that actually work for us so that we can move forward with a better firefighting plan. Forestry management. We know that we're not going to shut off the oil and gas today, but we need to focus on developing a group of scientists that I've talked about earlier that guide us. And what they immediately, we need to start looking at cleaner, greener energy. How do we do that? These scientists can help, especially with the tax dollars from the emitters, to work with us so that we can start looking at in the first 100 days, how can we do a better job? We have the technology. We have a lot of smart people all over Kootenay, Columbia, all over Canada that can help guide us and build us a better environment with what we have, but we're just not focusing on that. I mean, I've talked a bit about looking at different things like hydrogen and electric, but I think most important for me is looking at renewables and what can we do right now? And with the tax dollars from the energy sector, we can actually do that if we put that money into looking at how we're going to do a better job. Thanks so much. Really appreciate the question.
All right. Thank you, Rob. And now we'll move on to our next question. Taya, take it away.
All right, our seventh question will be presented by our lovely timekeeper, Jamie Hunter, on behalf of the Extinction Rebellion West Kootenay. Jamie wears many hats in this little, whatever we're calling it. Jamie, you have the floor.
Thank you, and I promise I will still make sure to keep everyone strictly on time, even after this question. This is the question. Old growth logging has become a huge topic in BC and around Canada in the past few months, particularly in light of the Fairy Creek blockades. Right now at Fairy Creek, RCMP are behaving in a violent and highly unprofessional manner towards peaceful protesters, while BC politicians claim that the actions of the RCMP fall under federal and not provincial jurisdiction. And so with that information, what would you do to ensure that old growth forest is protected in Canada and that a situation with RCMP behaving this violently does not happen again?
Very good question. And my apologies, I forgot to announce the speaker order. So the order for this question will be Wayne, and then Rana, and then Rob, and then Robin. So Wayne, if you want to start.
Thank you. A very important question, and it has come up on the doorsteps quite a lot over the last month or so as I've been traveling around the riding. So I think the best answer to the first part, what we should be doing with old growth, and as you know, the provincial government is responsible for forestry other than on federal land. So there is federal land in the Kootenays, over in the East Kootenays, but not very much of it. So primary responsibility is with the provincial government. And when you look at the report that was produced last fall, which the provincial government accepted, it talks about the need for a fundamental shift in how we think about our forests, a paradigm shift. And I absolutely support that we need to start thinking about our forests, our ecosystems, and certainly our old growth ecosystems as living, breathing entities rather than as standing timber waiting to be cut down. So I think long term, that's where we need to get. We need to really understand and appreciate our old growth ecosystems in British Columbia. Now, federally, a species becomes a federal concern when it makes the rare and endangered species list, because that is federal legislation. And so that's one of the questions I'd like to explore a little further, is at what point might these rare and endangered old growth forests fall under federal jurisdiction? In terms of the RCMP in Fairy Creek, the actions of the RCMP at Fairy Creek did not do the RCMP any good. It certainly did not do the protesters any good, and it did not do democracy any good. And yes, federally, RCMP fall under the federal government. So the commissioner and the minister responsible for the RCMP need to have some accountability in terms of what went on there. From my perspective, it is illegal. It was also, as I said, not really good for any aspect of our democracy or policing, quite frankly. And it should not happen again. So old growth is near and dear to my heart. It always has been. As I mentioned, I was the regional manager for Ministry of Environment for the Kootenays. We do need to have a balance around economy and forestry, but old growth needs special attention and special protection going forward for sure. But it needs to be not just a stand of trees, it needs to be old growth ecosystems that are protected.
And Wayne, I don't mean to interrupt, but your time is up. So if you want to finish up in a couple of sentences.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Rana, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Jamie, for this question. Yes, so the underlying issue regarding old growth forest protection is the reason why the protest is there in the first place. And as I alluded to in an earlier question, people get angry and they get frustrated when the values that we hold are not being represented in government action. And we know the importance of old growth to our planet. So we know that the provincial government is not holding itself to its own promises on old growth. And as far as RCMP and protester clashing, it is unfortunate. It is a difficult situation that everybody is in. As many of you likely know, my husband is an RCMP officer, and we have had many discussions on this issue. The RCMP are mandated to be there, given that the protesters are blocking roads. But again, that is not the real issue. The real issue is the protection of old growth forests. So RCMP will react when they are feeling threatened. They are also people with families. I was asked when I was early on in our marriage, somebody said to me, "How could you marry a cop?" And I said, "I am not married to a cop. I'm married to a person. And that person cares about life and justice and coming home safely to me and now our children every night." And I don't agree with violence. The Green Party principles are non-violent is one of our values. But let's again focus on the main issue, which is protecting our forests. Thank you, I'm finished.
Thank you very much. Rob, the floor is all yours.
Well, perfect. And I just want to say, I just was talking with one of a fourth generation logger, owns a sawmill just outside of Nelson. And I asked him about the old growth. I said, what is actually happening with old growth? And he said he has been 4 generations. He is not clear cutting. He is leaving old growth because, first of all, old growth is very difficult lumber to harvest. And usually it's partly rotten. So he said to me that he knows the value of forestry because 4 generations later, they still are a productive forestry operation. That is, in saying that though, it is provincial. The province hands out the old growth licenses. It doesn't come from the federal government. And just maybe to also talk a little bit about the RCMP. The RCMP are provincial police force. The provincial police force is mandated and run by the provincial government in BC. They do not report direct to Ottawa. The person who's in charge of British Columbia does, but the BC, it's a provincial police force. So it's a province that is actually directing what the RCMP will do in a provincial jurisdiction. If it's municipal, the RCMP in a municipality such as Cranbrook, then that is where the municipality steps in and they talk to the RCMP. So just a little bit of clarification on that. And I too agree with peaceful protests. I 100% want to see peaceful protests. And I think the old growth, we need to sit down, have some federal leadership. How much old growth do we have? What percent and why are they cutting it down? What is the purpose for that? And I agree with that. I think that we need to really, focus on, forestry is a huge part of the province of British Columbia. Our loggers, they want to be in business. They are not here to short themselves and to have their industry shut down. So I think we need to work with them. It's a viable industry, but it takes, again, leadership and partnerships with the province of BC. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So Robin, the question is all yours.
Old growth are an essential part of any effective national climate plan. The Liberals are the only party that have announced that they will help protect old growth forests in British Columbia. Okay, the NDP remain silent in their platform on this and still are not saying anything that they're going to move ahead on it. Permanently protecting more old growth forests in BC will help fight climate change and ensure that these iconic and globally significant ecosystems can thrive for generations. A re-elected Liberal government will help support BC, actually probably kick BC in the butt a bit to protect these old growth forests by reaching a nature agreement with the province of BC to protect more and expand the protected areas, establish a $50 million BC Old Growth Nature Fund, and work with partners to attract additional funding for further support of the protection of important old growth forests. I also want to say we got ensuring First Nations, local communities, and workers are partners in shaping the path forward on nature protection. Now, the Kootenay Columbia has more biogeoclimatic zones than almost everywhere in the world, except for the island of Hawaii. Now, I worked in value-added forestry and had a business in it for many, many years. We have many opportunities in forestry, many of them to expand value-added forestry. And we don't need to be cutting down old growth forests. It kind of makes me mad. So I am absolutely committed to protecting our old growth. I think it's essential when you look at how trees communicate. It's a lot like dendrites in the brain. And it is really, really important that we keep on this. Sustainable logging is essential. And we also have a plan, I just wanted to mention, we plan to protect 25% of Canada's lands, oceans, and fresh waters. And that's a big thing, 10 new national parks we've got in the works. So we are working really hard on this issue. And I thank you very much, Jamie, for bringing it up.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll hand it off to Lynn for our final question.
Thanks, Taya. So our final question, last but not least, comes from Ginger Oseki with Fridays for Future West Kootenai. And the speaker order for this question is going to be Rana, then Rob, then Robin, and then Wayne. All right, Ginger.
Yes, thank you, Lynn. So in June of 2021, the Stop Ecocide Foundation released a draft definition of ecocide, and the definition is as follows. Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those actions. Put simply, ecocide is the mass destruction of our environment. We believe that an international law of ecocide is needed to stop the ongoing destruction of our environment, both in Canada and internationally. What are your thoughts on making ecocide a crime at the International Criminal Court?
All right. And Rana, when you're ready, you can answer the question.
Thanks. I'll just reread it, Ginger, or read it actually. Yeah, I fully agree with this. We have laws against genocide, and it's the same thing. Again, it's an example of how we view nature, and that we view it as something to be exploited and used for our own benefit. It's not at all acknowledging that we live in harmony with nature. And we need to really take a long, hard look at our practices, because we know it's definitely not working. So as a Green Party, certainly we would push for this change or this acknowledgement. When we are focused again on the values that put health of the planet and health of the people first, then we can move in the right direction to making these changes. So this is a simple yes/no question to me, really. Yes, let's make it a crime. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rana. I guess we'll move along to Rob. If you'd like to answer the question, the floor is yours.
Perfect, and thanks for the question. I did actually present in June a petition to Parliament that was accepted, and I acknowledged and did support ecocide worldwide on behalf of your group, which I do support. I want to say that, you know, when it comes to climate change and even some other issues, it takes leadership of a country to work with other countries so that we can use our influence to help other countries do a better job. For example, we could work with China, we could work with the United States, we could work with any country, as long as we can sit down with them to help them do a better job of, for example, climate change, especially places like China. But when it comes to ecocide, I totally agree it is a world problem. It is not a Canadian only problem. And we have to start focusing on what we can do internationally in influencing, you know, what we want to do in Canada so that we all live in a better environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, we're moving right along. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I really appreciate the question. I think that it's really essential that we look at ecocide and things like the Brazilian rainforest being deforested for palm oil. We look at things like everything from the bee colony collapsing and, you know, Agent Orange. There's all kinds of different examples that you can think of for ecocide. And I think that it's essential that we start promoting to the rest of the world that we're in this swimming pool together, you know. And I mean, we all know the example about, you know, the non-peeing section, you know, and it's like we all have to work together. And I think that's really important. The thing we have to realize, though, there are a lot of countries like India or in Indonesia where people are more concerned about just getting food that day, or shelter, or just even their children are dying because they're not getting appropriate health care. So we have to also be sensitive to the needs of the other countries out there as well. So I absolutely support that making ecocide a crime, you know, and making sure that we move ahead to recognize that we're all in this together. We're all affected by it, and it's time for a direction where we let other countries get involved. We set the example, and I think that's a very important point. And as we set the example, we work to eradicate ecocide around the world. And I think a lot of that is also pulling people up, giving a hand up, helping developing nations so that they can recognize that they too are contributing to this and that they need to work with us. We need to make tech available. We need to make things affordable for them. There are so many things we can be doing to pull people along, to pull countries along, to pull corporations along so that we will address ecocide in the world. Okay, and lots of it's just even simple education. Thank you very much. Great question.
All right. Thank you so much, Robin. And Wayne, you can finish us out on this question.
So thank you. And the answer is certainly yes. As I said at the start, I've been working with and for the environment my entire life. And there have been many times along the way when I've sat there and asked the question, how can our societies around the world continue to think that we can take and take and take from the earth and that there won't be consequences? We are experiencing those consequences right now, and we need an entirely different paradigm, a different approach to how we look at the earth. It's a finite system. We need to recognize that. And if we need the laws in place to help enforce that paradigm, then absolutely we should be standing with those laws. I think for me, it starts with an environmental Bill of Rights for Canada. Hard to believe we're one of the few G7 nations that don't have an environmental Bill of Rights protecting all of our environmental rights in Canada. You know, a healthy environment is key to the health of our Indigenous friends and neighbors. It's key to their culture. And so if we do not have a healthy environment, we are impacting our Indigenous friends and neighbors. So we need to be very conscious of that as well and listen to their wisdom going forward. You know, I mentioned earlier that I was not happy with the RCMP at Fairy Creek. I have a great deal of respect for the RCMP. I have family members who are RCMP, and I think there are a lot of RCMP members that would love to be enforcing environmental laws, laws related potentially to ecocide here in Canada. So absolutely, we need to move in that direction, not only in the international courts, but right here in Canada, starting with an environmental Bill of Rights that helps protect our environment, helps protect our Indigenous cultures, and quite frankly, adds to very positive actions by the RCMP.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. So now that brings us up to our finishing remarks here. We'll move right into the final remarks for the candidates. So we are giving the candidates 2 minutes each for a closing statement. We will go in reverse order compared to the questions to switch things up. So we'll call on the candidates in this order. First, Rob, then Rana, then Wayne, and then Robin. So Rob, if you're ready to deliver your closing remarks, you may begin.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have people listen to where I stand and my platform, and also knowing that in the last 2 years, as your member of parliament, that I've represented all the people in Kootenay, Columbia, nonpartisan, and certainly have been very supportive in looking at cleaner, greener energy and how do we get there. I think that after this election, we need to have somebody elected who's going to take action and do something, not just talk about it. And it's going to take a true leader to do that. I'm the person who has shown and demonstrated that I'm there for you. I will help you with the environment, and that the Conservatives have a very solid environmental plan, a climate change plan that we are looking forward to moving forward with. There's a lot of great questions. I do also want to, just one thing I didn't mention earlier is Rana, I want to thank your husband for being out there protecting us. A very tough job, as Wayne has said as well. It's very tough for them to be put in that position. I respect the RCMP. I too have family members in the RCMP, as well as I have a bit of RCMP background as well. But I do want to thank everyone for coming tonight and for listening to us. It's hard to look at the screen for 2 hours, so I'm sure everybody's ready to tune out a little bit. Anyway, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Rob. And Rana, you can go next.
Thank you, Rob, for that. Yes, you know as well as anyone the issues faced by the RCMP, especially under mental health as well. And so thank you to everyone who has spent their time here tonight with us. It is heartening to see the concern that there is for our future and our planet. This is an election of crisis. We are in a moment of crisis, and we need to make the right decision about who is best to lead us out of it. I also want to thank all the volunteers who have been helping me throughout these last weeks. Definitely, this is not a one-person project or commitment. So I had people putting up signs, I had people phoning supporters, I had people coming door knocking with me and standing at the farmers market talking to people and my family as well. We went along on our Labor Day weekend through the Elk Valley. So they didn't always want to put on their green shirts, but but they did. And as well, I was for everybody who's been emailing me and Facebook and messaging. I thank you for that and the time you're spending to get to know all of us. I unfortunately am not able to answer all of the emails and messages that I get, but I am doing my best to answer as many as I can, and has really helped me understand the breadth of issues that we are all facing. So we've got 12 days to go. Advanced voting starts on the 10th. Please participate in those polls, as well as on the 20th, order your mail-in ballot through Elections Canada. There's still time to do that. And thank you again for your commitment tonight. Good night.
All right. Thank you, Rana. And Wayne, you're next up to deliver your closing statement.
Thank you to all of those who were part of organizing this evening. It is an extremely important topic. Number one on the list from traveling around the riding for the last month is climate change and fighting climate change. You know, I also want to thank the rest of the candidates for being here this evening. I know we're going to meet several more times over the next week or so. But I very much appreciate you taking the time to be here, and the 160 plus people that joined in. Climate change is the #1 environmental emergency of our time. And as I mentioned, in 2019, GreenPAC honored me with the Environment Leadership Championship, and now Lead Now has done the same as of last week. It is the most important issue of our time. And I think you really need to make a decision. And you know, when you look at the polls right from 2015, this riding either goes Conservative or it goes NDP. And so I am asking for the support from all progressive voters from all parties heading into this election. If you watch the Conservative convention, you'll know that 51% of the Conservative members did not believe that climate change is human caused. So think about your choice. Think who you want to have representing you in Ottawa and who you want to have there fighting climate change every day. I want to be that person, and I would very much appreciate your support. Thanks again for being here this evening. Look forward to meeting a number of you as we continue on the campaign trail for the next 12 days.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. And Robin, you may finish us off.
Well, I want to thank you all as well. The Liberals have the best plan to fight the climate crisis. It has the most depth, is the most comprehensive, and reaches further into the future than any other plan. It is our best bet for a healthy environment and a healthy, conscious economy. There's a reason why Andrew Weaver, Greens, Mulcair, NDP, the World Wildlife Federation, Oceans Network, Climate Choices, and more are applauding and saying the Liberal plan is bold, thoughtful, marvelous, the only credible plan at the national level. This is leadership, most ambitious, grounded in evidence and economically sound. Climate economists have given the NDP a 2 out of 10 for their plan. There are plans high on ideal, short on detail. I believe we deserve a stronger voice, someone willing to work diligently for us in Ottawa. That means energy, someone inclusive, someone qualified to stand up for us. I'm the only candidate who's owned businesses throughout the Kootenays in value-added forestry, tourism, consulting, and more. I'm a committed, unpaid volunteer. I'm connected with governmental climate leaders. I understand and passionately care about our concerns right here in the Kootenays. And I am absolutely committed to ensuring we in the Kootenay Columbia achieve all we can from these initiatives. It will take more than a few emails. I mentioned the 80 million for our electric ready ferry and charging station. That's no accident. We worked at it, lobbied for it, sent hundreds of emails, Mr. Morrison. We marketed it and ensured we got and saved Queens Bay. I am the candidate committed to this kind of hard grassroots work for our Kootenay Columbia. Look, my guarantee is I will pull the players together, federal, provincial, and local. I will provide help to maneuver the paperwork and grants process. And we've tried the left, we've tried the right. I hope you can see a vote for Robin is a progressive vote for climate action for us now. We can carry the
All right, Robin, and I just want to remind you that your time is up, so if you could finish up in a little bit here.
Okay, it's time for the progressive woman who will get the job done. Please visit our Liberal platform and voterobin.ca for more information. Thank you very much.
All right, and Taya can deliver our final goodbye here.
All right, well, to all the candidates, we thank you so much. We recognize this line of work is not an easy one, and we so appreciate you keeping our democracy strong by participating in this forum. A big thanks to our timekeeper, Jamie, and to all of those who helped put this event together from Fridays for Future and CCL. And a big thanks to the organizations and individuals who stepped up to ask questions. Finally, and arguably most importantly, be sure to get out there and vote. On a personal note, this is a very exciting election for me, as it's the first one since I've turned 18, and I am more than very excited to cast my first ballot. And I encourage you to all do the same. Advanced polls are open from the 10th to the 13th, and voting day is the 20th. And in lieu of the first week back of school, I'm going to give you all the homework to go and get 5 other people also to vote. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to be here, and have a great evening.
Right. Good night, everybody. And please feel free to fill out the poll on your way out.